All right, we're gonna try this again. I just tried it and it said I wasn't connecting. So we will see if this connects properly this time. And while it connects, I'm going to just make sure that it shows up on my computer, on my business page. So let's see. There it is. Okay, so I will get started. Welcome to this week's office hours. This is a new thing for me. It's something that I'll be doing every Friday. So if you are a small business owner or online entrepreneur, I'd love to have you join in the conversation. We are going to be talking about all sorts of issues that confront modern business owners, and especially people who are generating content, who really live in the information space. Hi Jessica, good to see you. I have to remember to look in the right location because people join and I want to watch the comments and the video. So I was just saying that today we are going to be talking about, and I had submitted to my list this week, even though I've had a cold and I haven't been very active, I actually got some great questions back on my email list when I invited people to ask questions that would be covered in future office hours. And one of those questions we're going to cover today. It's somewhat related to what we talked about last week, but it is about what to do if how to scout people who have taken your online content and are using it. So, there's a lot of questions about how do you find them in the first place, and then what do you do about it? And so while we wait, we'll see if anybody else joins. If you are watching this on a replay, welcome and thank you for watching, and be sure to comment so that I know that you saw it, and point out anything that's particularly helpful or any additional questions that come up for you on this topic, because I can cover those in future episodes. So by way of introduction, I'm Heather Pierce Campbell. I'm an attorney and legal coach based here in Seattle, Washington. I help small business owners and online entrepreneurs buckle up in business from a legal perspective. So understand what they need in their business, get legal tools in place. I do a lot of coaching and teaching on these topics. So like you'll see in today's video, we'll go through lots of information that is really designed to help small businesses and online entrepreneurs stay safe in business and be successful and be able to control their content, create, a profitable business and do it the right way. The way that online businesses and some small businesses evolve, especially in the information space, is a little different than brick and mortar businesses. So my goal is to really help people in that particular niche. Online coaches, consultants, information entrepreneurs, really understand the legalities of being in business and do it the right way. So with that, let's get started. Again, you are in the right place if you are wondering or have ever wondered, how do you scout people that are using your online content? And then, as I mentioned, we'll go through at the end a few strategies about how you deal with that if it does happen. And this is actually a nice segue. I'm glad somebody asked this question, because it's a nice segue on the topic that we covered last week, which is about copyrights, online content, the need to protect what we do online. I gave some examples that I'll reshare quickly here that are for one client, for example, we currently have a list of like 50 to 60 people that are using his online content in a wrong way, right? So we're having to pursue those people. So it happens regularly. It particularly happens to people that have any kind of a following and are doing great business. I've had it happen quite a bit in my own business. So it's just something that people who are in modern business need to be aware of. So again, the question is, how do you scout people who are using your content? There's a couple ways, and I'll go over the free way, and then we can go over a paid option. And I'm sure there's many other paid options, but I'll talk to you about the one that I use. And if at any point this content is particularly helpful for you in business, I'd love for you to share the video, give me a like, give me a heart. I'm going to learn this Facebook Live thing, and I'm determined to get good at it, and your support really means a lot. So Jessica, thank you for hanging in there with me. I hope you're doing well. And then hopefully we'll get some people on the replay who this can really help in their business as well. So if that's you, be sure to say hi. So let's jump into how to scout your online, and actually I just have to remember to do one thing. I'm going to share this to my own page, which is the other trick, because I have a lot of friends who are entrepreneurs. So give me just a second. Here we go. Entrepreneurs. Okay, so sorry. Thanks for bearing with me. I'm going to post that really quickly. So free ways that you can find out who's using your online content. One is to create, so in Google, I mean, Google is the master of all tools, but just using Google, a Google search, and you usually can't search like a whole, let's say you have a whole web page, you probably couldn't search the whole page of text. But if you have written a particular section of text on a page that you know is super unique to you, super unique to your business, then you can, you know, try searching a paragraph of each page that you're concerned about that, you know, maybe the public has general access to. Although keep in mind, even if you have online content that is paid, where you have created a program or a membership site, plenty of people will take that content as well and use it elsewhere. So really you could use this search in any of your content. Go plug it into Google. Don't use more than about a paragraph of language, because sometimes it gives you, you know, like an error message in return if the search is too long. But this is where in your writing, in your copy, in whatever it is that you're creating in your business, as far as your online content or inside of your membership programs or sites, to really infuse your stuff with your own personality. The more that you do that, the harder you are to copy. Because if you have signature phrases, if you express yourself in a really, you know, unique or particular way, and you know that, which, you know, can be hard to do. There's a lot of phrases that get used in modern online marketing that are not that unique. So this is again where it pays. It is helpful to be unique and use your personality a lot. But try running a search on a paragraph of text, and you might be surprised what you find. I did that for a while on some of my content, knowing that certain pages were more likely than others to be duplicated. And I regularly found people who were infringing that content. So that's one way. Excuse me. I'm getting over a cold, so I came prepared. I have my coffee, my tea, my water, and my cough drops. But excuse me for a moment. So you can run Google searches. Obviously, that can be a little bit time consuming. You have to sort through your followers. I mean, you have to sort through your results that come up. And it looks like somebody else has joined in. We'll see if they're able to pop up on the screen at some point. But hello and welcome. And let's see. So the paid tool, aside from using, and I'm sure that there's other free tools. So for example, if you're on a WordPress site, I know that there's going to be plugins that you could use. I don't personally have experiences with those, and so I'm not going to talk about those today. But the one that I will talk about is a paid solution. It's one that I've just started using myself, and it's not that expensive. It's $4 or $5 a month. It's actually the one that I meant to mention at the end of last week's video. It's called Copy Sentry, and actually I'm just going to type it in real quick because Copy Sentry is the name of the program. Yeah, it's run by Copyscape. Anyways, you can have, and it has different levels of service that it provides, right? So for example, I think you can have up to maybe 9 or 10 web pages searched for $4 or $5 a month, and it'll search, you know, the whole web. And when I say the whole web, It really, obviously, like any search, is limited to what has already been indexed on the web. So it's entirely possible that somebody with an obscure website, somebody that is not that searchable, is using your content and it doesn't come up in those searches, right? So understand that there may not be a tool that is perfect, but there are going to be various tools, I'm sure, that work relatively well. Copy Sentry, which is run by Copyscape, is one of them. And I just chose like 5 of my own web pages that I thought were probably the critical ones. I mean, I still have room to go up to 10, but then what happens is it runs a weekly search for you where you don't have to do any of the work. You get essentially an email each week that says, hey, here are your results for the week. And then you can take follow-up actions based on that, right? So you have a list. And the thing that's cool about this service, because, you know, when I go back to the question that I got from, you know, one of the people on my email list about how do you scout out who is copying your stuff? It's a bigger conversation than just looking at like certain words being copied, certain concepts. And so we're going to talk about some important concepts in copyright law today that will help people when they're navigating, trying to suss out who copied, to what extent did they copy, what rights do I have to pursue this person for copying, right? Because it's kind of, it can be murky waters. It's not always a really like clean, you know, bright line. So what I was starting to say about Copy Sentry as a tool is it'll actually evaluate. So for example, let's see, is that Jeannie? Hi Jeannie, I see that you just joined. We are talking about what to do for copycats online, how to tell if people are copying your content, what to do about it. So as you know, I work with a lot of business owners and online entrepreneurs, and this is a major problem. Excuse me again. This cold is getting the better of me. So I was just talking about Copy Sentry, which is a program that's fairly inexpensive that will allow you to identify what pages either of a website or online content that you want checked to see if other people on the web are copying them. And it's, oh goodness. I was so committed to hosting this, even though this cold has been a bugger. And it looks like we have a few more people on. Hi, Erin. Glad to see you. Thanks for popping on. I was just talking about a tool. Yeah, it's information. Thank you that you say, and I see your comment that I love this information. Everybody who does online work or online business needs to know about this stuff because it's a real issue. I was just talking about this tool called Copy Sentry. Excuse the cough drop in my mouth now. That will run searches for you. It's relatively inexpensive. You can have up to, I think, 10 web pages for the $4 or $5 monthly price searched on the web. You don't have to do the work. You don't have to be plugging it into Google. You don't have to be, you know, trying to suss it out yourself, which can be really time consuming. And then you get a weekly report from Copy Sentry that says, hey, here are your results, gives you a listing, and the cool part is that it tells you essentially what percentage of your document has been duplicated. So it's a really powerful tool because you know, for example, so like I had a guy in the UK and I think it was like, you know, 86% essentially an exact duplicate, right? And it shows you a comparison. You can click in, compare your web page or whatever it is that you're concerned about having copied and their version. And then it will show you which areas overlap. So that's what makes this tool powerful. And it looks like somebody else joined. We have a few more eyes. So say hello if you're on. Welcome. Please share this information if it's helpful. If you're on the replay, welcome as well. And make sure that you comment so that I know that you were here. But in talking about Copy Sentry, it will give you, so this guy, for example, in the UK had copied, you know, 86% of an entire page of my website and had removed certain portions that, you know, weren't applicable to his business or whatever. So I could tell very quickly, you know, did somebody just take a few words? And it will tell you even as far down as like 4 or 5%. Like it will compare the whole page across the web and tell you who has copied your stuff. So back to, you know, my the question that I received this week about scouting these people. You do have to really be aware, is it an exact duplicate? What percentage of your web page or your copy did they duplicate on their site? Because I know that the reader in question had said that they could tell somebody was accessing their site and reproducing their content, but changing a bit of the language. And let's talk about why that's a little bit tricky when that happens. So understand, and this is one of the main points I wanted to make in today's video, is that our copyright laws and copyright protection here in the States doesn't, okay, and Aaron, I see your question too, which is a great question. I will get back to that after we cover this, about your private online courses, because that's a huge issue. But let's first talk about copyright laws in the US. They protect the expression of an idea, not the idea itself. So for example, somebody really likes something that you do and they express it in a whole different way. Hi Omar, good to see you on here. We are talking about protecting online content and how do you scout people who've taken your content and what do you do about it. So I hope you'll go back and watch the first part. I talked about CopySentry, and then now we're talking about copyright law generally in the US and what it protects. And I had just said it protects the expression of an idea, not the idea itself. So as one of my readers asked this week about, you know, what to do when you can tell somebody's copying you, but they're really changing up the language so that it's not your exact language, right? So it's not your exact expression of the idea. It gets a little bit trickier because a couple of things happen in the business marketplace. One is ideas tend to evolve at the same time. So it is entirely possible, and I have seen this happen numerous times, where two people not related, not in the same social circles, have very similar ideas, develop them simultaneously, and they just look a lot alike, whether it's through the expression of language that they use, whether it's just, you know, the idea itself. And people have gotten themselves into trouble by making assumptions that the other person copied them, sending off, and we're going to talk about one of the big myths today, which is that, you know, the appropriate response always is to send a cease and desist. We're going to talk about why that can get people into big trouble, because you have to really know what you're doing if you do that. And we'll talk about why and when it's appropriate to get legal counsel, because there is a downside to using a cease and desist when you are alleging that somebody else has copied your content. So what do we need to pay attention to? One is suss out with a tool like CopySentry, like I just mentioned, what percentage of your content is being copied. And Aaron, to get to your question about whether it's, you know, the information you have readily online, like the public could access on your website or wherever, or even if it's inside a membership site or an other protected site where you have content that generally people have paid to access, right? A lot of people make the mistake that because people have paid for it, there's no way they would do anything bad with it, right? They're going to follow your terms, assuming you have terms in place, which is one way to protect yourself. And people often think, well, you just have to have a federal registration of some kind to have protection. No, that is one way, but you can also have contractual terms in place, right? So this is where if you're selling an online program You want to always be sure that you have terms of purchase in place for that program, because somebody could very well violate the terms of that contract. And even without a federal registration, let's say copyright or trademark, you could still pursue them for violation of the contract. And that's one way to protect yourself, keep your content safe, and can be easier in some ways than obtaining a federal registration if that's just not on your, your strategy list yet. So, but a service like Copy Sentry, you can tell it to search any of your pages. So even with a private online course, you show it the web page, like you actually type in the web address that you want it to search for, and it will go out on the World Wide Web and search, all the content that's been indexed and let you know if there are any duplicates down to like a few percentage points. And with those ones, you have to be careful, because oftentimes it is literally just a few words or a phrase or something that has been, that overlaps. And it's not really that somebody's copying you. So you do have to know how to filter through your results with Copy Sentry, but it's a very helpful tool if you have a following, if you suspect that people are copying your content. And for anybody who really has a going business, it probably, if it's not already an issue for you, then it will be. So this is just something to really understand and know about. So let's recap, right? We've talked about searching for free on Google. We've talked about Copy Sentry. We've talked about copyright law itself, protecting the expression of an idea, not the actual idea, right? So understand that, because even if something looks like copying, you may not have rights to go pursue them. And that is where, if you have big questions because it's not really clear, for example, that they've just copied you word for word, or even copied just huge portions. So it's totally possible that somebody would plagiarize, for example, a huge portion of your page and then change a few bits of it. There are still some real copyright issues with that, right? Because they've just flat out plagiarized you, and that's not allowed. And some people, so this is another question that I got recently, and that is a really frequent one. And because it's related, I just want to address it here, but some people do incorporate into their business concepts developed by somebody else, right? So I had a gal ask, one of my clients ask, well, I've developed a workbook, I have most of my own systems and information in place, but there are 2 or 3, and we'll call them like lessons or something that she walks through that's other people's content, like 10 steps to whatever. That you need to be careful about, because when you are duplicating somebody else's system, that and that can be an expression of an idea, right? So even if you don't use the exact same wording for the 10 steps, still really clear that those 10 steps originated in somebody else's body of work, because that is their work. You probably should not be duplicating that content in your own work, unless, for example, you have permission, right? So express written permission, which, needs to be drafted carefully, but would allow you certain uses of that content. Some people are totally fine doing that with proper references, right? It's additional exposure for them. They want the references. So sometimes that's easy to obtain. Other times it's not, unless you either want to pay for it or work out some other terms. That, especially when it's somebody's, lifetime body of work, generally should not be reproducing that or any portion of that inside of your own stuff. So my advice to this person was to, either get permission, and if she couldn't get permission, take it out, utilize some of the ideas or something as inspiration to create her own system or her own approach to that content, so that it didn't really look anything like the other person's content. So I hope that helps for those of you, because I know we all do. We learn a ton being in business, and we incorporate numerous ideas into things that we do, but it's really, really good to understand how clear you need to be about whether it's your own work, whether it originated with somebody else, whether it truthfully is wholly somebody else's idea, or whether it's your own idea based on, you know, a combination of, you know, what you've learned plus your own experience added in. So there's ways that ideas morph. But just keep that in mind. And then when it comes to copying and spotting your copycats, you know, when do you let it go? So I'll give you an example from my business. There's a woman who did a similar line of work, and somebody pointed out her webpage to me one day because it had very similar language, like similar phrases that I use. It was pretty clear to me that she had done some copying from my webpage, right? But it wasn't necessarily one of my signature ideas. It wasn't language that I have any claims around, right? None of us have claims around specific language unless, for example, we own a trademark, a federal registration over that phrase or that language. Or we have filed a copyright registration, for example, to protect a whole web page of a website, right? Which is a good idea. I mean, once you have a following, and that's something that's on my own list to look at, is what of my pages, which is partly why I'm going through the monitoring now, what of my pages do I need to protect? Because once you obtain a copyright registration over a work, whether it's a web page, whether it's a video, we talked in last week's office hours a bit about what you can copyright. You know, once you've obtained that and you have somebody that has clearly infringed and like duplicated word for word your stuff, your ability to seek damages goes up. Although, and I'll repeat the same tip that I spoke briefly about last week, if, and this is a huge one for online digital content creators, if you have created, let's say, a web page or an image, right, for people who are artists, and maybe you create a photograph or an image, if you've done that digitally and it lives, you know, online or somewhere digitally, always apply your copyright mark or your copyright claim, right? So, you know, you created something in 2016 and the copyright rests with you individually, right? So you put that right on the image or on your web page. If somebody duplicates that web page or that image and they scrape the copyright, statutory damages start at $2,500 for that. I don't know if they're set at that or they start at that, but it's not like, you know, you have to have a federal registration or there's no alternatives. Depending on what it is, there are alternatives. So be sure that with your key work and the stuff that you're putting online, that you apply your copyright mark and that you monitor that. And just understand you do have some alternatives if somebody takes that and scrapes the copyright off and uses it as their own. So that's happened to me. It's happened to lots of people, but you have kind of an added level of protection there. So before we wrap up, one, if this has been helpful, please share. I would love your support if you know other people that need to hear this content, that are online content creators themselves, that are facing this issue of having to tackle copycats. I can't cover everything in one office hour. Excuse me. I apologize for this cold. But, you know, each of the things that we've talked about today, hopefully, you know, my goal is to help you build your foundation so that you at least have some understanding about how to approach these issues, how to protect your stuff. And hi, Isabel. Good to see you on here. So, I see your question. What is included in a copyright? Maybe another way to ask that is what protection does obtaining a copyright registration give? Is that the question? Or if it's the question of what is included in the copyright claim, like the copyright mark you apply to your stuff, usually you identify by year the time frame that the content was created, whether it's a web page, whether it's an image, right? So you would say copyright 2016 or 2017, you know, and then usually copyright, yeah, it's actually a C inside of a circle. So sometimes you can create that by doing a C inside of double parentheses. If it doesn't show up, like if you can't create that on your computer or phone or wherever you are, I would just write out copyright, right? So copyright 2017 and then copyrights generally rest with the individual. As soon as you've created something, whether it's a work of art, whether it's a web page, copyrights are essentially automatically granted in you as the person and the creator of that work. What the federal registration does, let's say that you create that, you apply your copyright mark, and then you decide at some point you are going to get a copyright registration, right? You would submit essentially a duplicate of that web page or your digital image, whatever it is that you are wanting copyrighted, to the U.S. Copyright Office. And the fee, by the way, is not that. I think it's a $35 fee per copyright obtained. So it's not that much, especially for your core work. So I definitely recommend for people that are doing workbooks, online membership sites, training videos where the video is a key part of their training, obtain a copyright on the video, on the web page, the workbook, the guide sheet, whatever it is you're creating and selling, or that you don't want duplicated. Decide what your core content is and put a budget together so that you can get that protected. What that does is it does allow you the right to pursue damages in court if you have obtained a registration in advance. And then what happens, because then you are the presumed owner, so a court, it makes it way easier for a court to look at the original content subject to the copyright protection and say, oh yeah, this is you, this is your work, you obtained the registration. They're much more willing and able to protect it on your behalf. So the presumption is in your favor once you obtain the registration, and that's really one of the big benefits of obtaining that registration. Plus then your ability to get damages on the back end goes way up, because you generally can recover things like attorney's fees, sometimes punitive and additional damages. So there's a real benefit to having registrations for sure. But even if you don't, earlier in the video we talked about another strategy that will help you at least for digital content, which can be very helpful for people who are creating a ton of digital content. Because maybe they're not going to copyright every single web page they put up, right? So know that you have alternatives. And then when do you let it go? So I talked a little bit about my example of the woman that it's pretty clear to me. She had been to my website, copied some of my key language, but one, it wasn't an exact duplicate. Two, it was interspersed with her own stuff. It wasn't like she had copied a whole page of my stuff. And so, yes, it was actually my home page, like my main landing page on my website. So that was irritating because there were some phrases on there that, were plugged right into her content. Fabulous. Omar would love to talk to you about that. Online TV show. That's exciting. Very cool. Would love to chat. So know that sometimes, and if you need the help of an attorney to figure this out, which you may, if you have copycats and you don't know, for example, whether or not you should pursue them, whether or not you have rights, then by all means, I would recommend that you contact an attorney who could help you do an evaluation of the content, walk through, whether or not they think that it's worth pursuing, etc. And that can really be helpful from a strategic standpoint, especially if you're going to get to the point of sending a cease and desist. Because remember, I said that we were going to cover one of the big myths, which is that you always just respond with a cease and desist. And that gets people to stop and they take it down and there's no more problems. No, that's not always the case, and that can result in big problems for you. So let me walk through some examples of how a cease and desist can hurt you if you do it wrong, or if you make the wrong assumption about somebody copying you, right? So again, I'm going to revisit the notion that certain ideas can actually evolve at the same time with two totally different people across the world, and have them each be their own idea, right? So it is not the case that just because you see something that looks really similar to what you're doing, that person has copied you. And that's where it really pays to be strategic. Because, for example, let's get to the big owie that can happen if you send a cease and desist and you're wrong. So let's say I'm in Seattle, which I am, and I send a cease and desist to somebody in Florida who I believe has copied my stuff, right? And maybe I'm right that they have, and maybe I'm wrong that they haven't. But either way, unless I'm prepared to either immediately following that letter, or even, I mean, better yet is simultaneously or even preceding it, file a lawsuit. Usually, you want that lawsuit to be in your home jurisdiction, and it would be a lawsuit that alleges the infringement and is basically asking the court to determine that this person is copying your stuff, right? Unless you're at the point of doing that, you could actually end up having to respond to one of those lawsuits. And in the case of a defendant, in the case of the person receiving that letter, that cease and desist, deciding that they're mad enough, they're going to take you to court because, one, it was their idea. Maybe it looked like copying, but it really wasn't. And so they're going to seek a declaratory judgment. That's what it's called. They're going to seek a declaratory judgment in Florida, where they're based. You could actually end up defending a lawsuit where the recipient is based. So you need to be strategic in evaluating, and this is, again, where any attorney would tell you to get legal counsel, right? Because none of this is that I'm giving in this video, and I probably should have started with this, but none of this is specific legal advice, right? It's general strategies, general legal information to help people in business. But every case is unique, and this is where if you have one that's complex, or you have a person that you're not really sure if they've copied your stuff, sending a cease and desist can be a little bit scary, because you can end up defending a lawsuit across the United States or wherever, and that wouldn't be very pleasant for you. So you want to be able to evaluate, and be pretty accurate about the chances that this person really did copy you. What percentage? What's the upside, right? So what are the damages? Because that will help determine whether or not it's worth it to bring your own action. And if there's a significant likelihood that they either didn't copy you, or that it's not obvious enough that it's your content, you might have a hard time, and you might still end up defending one of those lawsuits. So I just want to raise that as a red flag, because I get asked that question a lot about, well, can't I just send a cease and desist? Yes, you can, but you should know what you're doing. You should have evaluated some of these other things I talked about, and you maybe should seek legal counsel ahead of taking that step. Okay, so a couple of other strategies before I let you go, and I understand we've already been on here for 40 minutes, so thank you for hanging with me if you guys are still on. I see a few eyes, although I'm not sure who's there. Like I said, if it's been helpful, share when we get done. If you have friends that would like to see this and need to hear the same information. But let's talk just about a couple more strategies for addressing copycats before we jump off, right? Because you could send a cease and desist. We talked a little bit about that one, and particularly the risk side of that one. It can be effective, so it's not that it shouldn't be used. Just understand there's alternatives. So that's one strategy, cease and desist. The second strategy is I'll call it a less forceful response to that person, which is, pinging them through an email or a message that's like, hey, what are you up to? It's like a gentle, like, I see you, I see your stuff, but you're not directly saying, you're not claiming you're infringing my content. As soon as you allege infringement, that is when they have the basis to bring a declaratory action against you. So, you know, there's a way to be tricky and send out a little message or a hello that lets this person know, like, you're on my radar. I see you. I'm watching your business. And that might be enough to make some people go, ooh, yeah, I just copied her webpage. I should probably take that down. It may not. Some people need more forceful language than that, but that is a strategy where you don't have to get yourself into hot water by alleging infringement, but you are letting the person know that you've seen what they've done. So there's that, the kind of gentle nudge strategy. There is the strategy of just going directly to the website host. So you can actually, so let's say somebody has copied several pages of your website. You could, thank you, appreciate the thumbs up. You could, rather than sending a cease and desist, rather even contacting them directly, you could figure out, and there's ways to do this. I'll try to find the link of another training I did on this that's a longer video that walks you through the exact steps. But essentially what you do is you go to, thanks for the smile, Isabel. You go to the search engine, and I forget if it's who is or I can, because one, you're looking for the actual, another person involved in that chain of hosting websites, another entity. But essentially, you could contact, so let's say you find out that somebody, to find out the host. So one, you can find out the registrar, but then you can also separately find out the host. So let's say, for example, somebody has duplicated a bunch of your content. You find out that they're being hosted through Bluehost. You can go to Bluehost, and most most website hosts will have this. You look at the bottom for either copyright claims or copyright infringement. There should be a link. Sometimes it might even be called a DMCA takedown notice. There's various ways that website hosts will identify it on the bottom of their website. But you can submit a claim directly to the website host to have that content removed. And this does a couple things. One, it will remove the host as a third party from any potential claims that you have, right? So you could potentially bring a claim against anybody who's helping to host infringing content, which is why Bluehost, you know, GoDaddy, YouTube, Facebook even, none of them want to be involved in that. Excuse me. So generally, they're pretty responsive. They will take down the content, let the website owner know this content was removed because it's subject to this copyright claim. You definitely have to follow their steps. Like once you click through to that link, they'll usually give you 5 to 7 steps that you have to follow that fulfills their requirements, their due diligence on their end to make sure that, it's a valid claim. They don't want to cause people trouble. They want to only do this in response to valid claims. So they ask you some questions and will collect certain information. But so long as you follow those steps the right way, you can get that content taken down pretty quickly for US-based websites and US-based hosts. Not always, depending on other areas of the world. So that's another thing, right? So cease and desist, you can do the gentle nudge, you can go right to the website host and do follow their copyright claim instructions or a DMCA takedown notice. Those are the big ones. There's some additional strategies, but they're a little bit more complex, and I might cover those a different day. So I hope that helps. Understand you have options. You have options that you can take on your own without an attorney. You could take any of those options with the assistance of an attorney, right, which can help in some of the more complex scenarios. But yeah, that was pretty much what I had on my list to cover today, and I hope that for those of you who are facing either copycat issues or some copyright issues yourself, that was helpful. You're so welcome, Isabel. Thanks, Jessica. You're a trooper for hanging in there the whole time. Please feel free to share and join me next week on next week's office hours at noon. So same time every Friday. We'll be tackling new questions. Sometimes we'll probably be covering similar topics, just going either into more depth or covering some additional information. but all of these are relevant to small business owners and online entrepreneurs. But thank you so much for joining. I really appreciate it. Again, if you're watching the replay, say hello. Let me know what questions you have. Let me know if this was helpful. Have a good weekend, you guys. I'm gonna go drink some tea now. Okay, bye-bye.